Now the same way, our string name is given a default value of an empty string. Two double quotes together. Now, in our constructor, we do have some code. We have an if statement that is like limiting our intensity. If somebody passed in something that's greater than 10, we're going to make it 10. My friend needs that rule, right? But nobody's given him that rule. And then we are saying, what if they passed in parameters, or if they didn't, using the default, set our instance variables, driver intensity and driver name, equal to the values that were passed in our parameters. So now we've taken these values that were given to us, that I want a new motorcycle, it's going to be really fast, it's going to be 10, it's going to be moto, whatever, and then our motorcycle class is saying, oh, okay, well, I'm going to save that intensity and that name in my instance variables so that if anybody asks, I can tell them what your settings are. So we can do a lot with constructors. Now, after that region, we have a method that's going to set the driver name. We have our Papa Wheelie method. And then we have one that sets our intensity. Let's put a region statement to handle all of those. I'm going to say # region. These are instance methods. So these are all of the methods that are available to every instance of our motorcycle. Now I want to close that region statement. So I'm going to come to the end of my set intensity method and do the end region. Now if I close all these down, let's do it. You can go find specific areas of your code a little bit easier. So that's why people like the region statements. Now in our instance methods, if I expand those, notice that every method already has, kind of a roll-up point already given to it, so we can handle that. Now, looking at our set driver name method, it has some interesting code. So this method is using a Lambda expression. Let's put a comment in there about that. And that's just the equal greater than sign. And it's kind of a shortcut indicator. And so that shortcut indicator is saying that instead of me having opening and closing curly braces for this method with a whole body thing, notice I don't have opening and closing curly braces at all. So the Lambda expression says instead of having that full method body, my method only contains one line of code, and this is it. Set the driver name equal to the name that was passed in. So the Lambda is a shortcut indicator that indicates there is a one statement body in this case. Okay, let's look at our car. Now in our car class, we have some state variables, instance variables. Actually, we only have our current speed. In the state, they're saying, is the state of these variables. You know, what kind of situation is our car in? What is its current speed? What is its pet name? Then we have a little bit different of a constructor here. In this example, we have a constructor for our car. Again, it says public and the name of our class. And in this constructor, it just sets our instance variables to certain values. So instead of using that kind of syntax like the motorcycle class did, this one just uses kind of a more straightforward syntax of setting up those instance variables default values. But then we get away from that to simple syntax. And in the next example, we have a Lambda expression again, saying that if somebody passes in a string, that's the pet name, and we want that pet name set to that string they passed in. So huge shortcut for us to be able to use those Lambda expressions, but a little bit more challenging for the beginning programmer. Now, this next car constructor has an example where we want a string and an integer. So in this constructor, we're expecting someone to pass us the pet name and the current speed. Now, there are 3 methods in this program, in this class, that are all named exactly the same. Car, car, car. This is an instance of an overloaded method. Now, the method here that's overloaded is our constructor. So this is an overloaded constructor method. And what this is saying is, if somebody creates an instance of a car with no parameters, C# will use this constructor. If somebody creates an instance of a car and they pass in a string, it will use this instance of the constructor that only expects a string. But if they pass a pet name and a current speed, 2 parameters, then we'll end up using this constructor because that'll match their call. So again, we see another way that C# is really powerful, that we can use the same method over and over, having different things happen depending on how we were called. So that really gives us an example of that overloaded constructor. And then we have 2 methods that are using the Lambda expression to indicate they only have 1 line of code each in them. So lots of great stuff. So let's go back to our program.cs file. And I want to start. It's nice for us to look at the code and to go through it, but sometimes it's not as meaningful, and sometimes you want to be able to do that at home. And so I want to show you how to use the debugger with Visual Studio so you can go step by step through the lines of code. So try it with me so that you can see what's going on, and you can yell out if something isn't making sense to you, or if you don't see something that we're looking at. The thing with the debugger is we can use it in many, many, many different ways. But one of the simplest things to do is just set a breakpoint. And what a breakpoint is it says stop executing here, let me take over and see what's going on, and then I'll continue execution if I want. So I'm going to set my breakpoint to be right here on my line 22, where we create that new motorcycle named C. So set that breakpoint. Notice I just went all the way over to this gray bar, and I clicked there on that line 22, and that put that red dot on that line, which indicates it's a breakpoint. Now, there's lots of other ways to do that. You can right-click on the line and choose breakpoint. I don't know, I've already got it now, but you would have add breakpoint if you didn't already. Up in your menu, on your debug menu, there is a new breakpoint option. So debugging is really, really important. If you're starting to get that impression, you're right. Because when you come in and you look at code that's not yours and you haven't seen before, the debugger is the best way to figure out what's going on. So now I've got my breakpoint set. I'm just going to start running my program. The debugger can be kind of hard to use when we're working with a console program, because we have to sort of go back and forth between what the debugger is showing us and what the console is showing us. So right now on my console screen, I see that my fun with class types message has already come out. That makes sense. That was this line of code up here. And now C# or the IDE is stopped on line 22. And I have this red circle, which was my breakpoint, and the yellow arrow indicating to me that that's where we're stopped right now. So this line of code has not executed yet. It hasn't been executed. We're sitting here waiting to execute it. So what's going to happen when we do? Well, in order for us to see, we need to kind of look around in our environment and see what we have going on. What kind of information do we have? Down here at the bottom, you should be seeing the locals screen, which is showing you the variables that are declared in our program.cs file. Over here, we have what's called the call stack, which is kind of the sequence of who called who. So we can see all that information. We can do a lot more with the debugger though, so there's lots of other things. Now in your toolbar, when you see your stop button, go a little further over, and we want to find this blue down arrow that says step into. When we choose step into, that says go ahead and step into that line of code and start executing it. If we wanted to skip that line of code, we could choose step over. Or if we wanted to step out of the debugger completely, we could step out of the debugger. Trouble? Do you see them? Let's see if we can find them. Are they hiding? That's why I wanted to do it together. Sometimes it's all right, so I want to step into. Now, as soon as I step into this, I'm going to be running this line of code. So I'm going to see that execution control is going to branch from my program.cs file to my motorcycle.cs file. And we'll see that happening as it starts executing that constructor. So now we're in our motorcycle class. We've switched our execution. And in our motorcycle class, we're starting in our constructor. We're going to set those default values. If you look down at your locals screen, you should see them. We're passing in an intensity of 5. So we should be able to watch that get updated. I'm going to step into again. Now, when you're using the debugger, the local screen is one area to see what your variables and things are set to, but you can also mouse over them. So if I mouse over this intensity variable, it shows me that it's set to 5, so I can see what's going on there. All right, I'm going to keep stepping into. Now I'm going to get my class instance variables properly set. And I'm done creating a motorcycle. I'm going to click this one more time though, and now I can actually see it down here in my locals area. Now, do you see your instance C? If we click the rectangle to expand it, you should see your instance variables. So instead of just having one variable in my program like a string, a class gives me the ability to kind of bundle a bunch of variables up together and say these all work together. They're the data part of this class. Now I'm going to keep stepping through my program. I'm going to run this c.setDriverName to tiny. Now we should see again execution control switch back to our motorcycle class. Oh, yep, there's our motorcycle class. It's running that one line of code to update the driver name. Did it. Now we're going to run our Papa Wheelie. And we're back to our motorcycle class running our Papa Wheelie. We could do our for loop. Oh, that's where our yeehaw came from. All that wheelie popping. Now with the debugger, I could update the value of certain variables if I want to, so I don't have to sit here and go through this loop. But that's for another day. So this day I'll just sit here and go through it. Okay, I finished the Papa Wheelie. And as you walk through the code, you can actually Watch how your execution control branches from one thing to another. We're going to create a motorcycle. Again, our Harley. And now we should, if I go one more, we'll see we have our C motorcycle and our Harley motorcycle. This tester is kind of big, so I'm going to stop execution, but I want you to experiment with it whenever you have an opportunity. I'm going to click on this. Sometimes just trying things like that is the best way to understand how things are going, because even if you're just staring at it, clicking that button, sometimes you can have an epiphany and understand something that you didn't understand before. Questions about it? So quiet.